Hello and welcome to BOT. Nidal, Lakshit, Suman, and Manthan meet here to talk about the bits of tech as it relates to digital transformation. Tune in and enjoy.
Go.
Hello, everyone. We are back with our beautiful banners again. This time to talk about some ideas of measurement. Um, we started this podcast with absolutely nothing, both in terms of digital assets and in terms of having actual anything on paper, right? Then came the idea of posting this on YouTube, and then we started measuring it. um, we have gotten, to my knowledge, up until 400 views on one of the videos that we posted from absolutely nothing. That gives me immense pleasure. Even if it were four, it would have given me a lot of pleasure. It's not about the number which looks great, It's about having at least one more person benefit from this, and knowing that back gives all of us, and I'm speaking for all of us here, a lot of gratification, right? We would not have gotten this gratification unless we were able to measure what is happening with this podcast, right? Such is life. We like to measure everything. And it could be social media where I posted a picture and I've gotten n number of likes or n number of comments, but that's the world we live in, like it or not. You may hate it, you may absolutely love it, but either way, we are living in the world of Matrix, which is the segue to what we are going to talk about today. That is Matrix, the idea of measurement, that came into the play as businesses progressed, right? Um, if you cannot measure it, it is basically as good as not done. I could be sending a flash message to 10 million people, but if I didn't know how many of them actually saw it or read it or made use of it, then those 10 million flash messages are as good as nothing in the world that we are in today. There was a time when it did not matter in terms of tracking back these numbers, but now we are in an era where we are not only tracking back but also analyzing fully as to what happens there. And probably that's a huge part of the reason why all of us are working in this industry right now, and that this is even an industry, right? I'll open it to everyone's thought to understand what they have experienced in terms of matrix, and how is it that a business has four KPIs but 4,000 metrics to report back to those KPIs, and how we continue to build a story where only 10 metrics are the ones that matter, but we still continue to measure those 4,000 metrics there are, right? That's the real life um, implication of having measurement in our heads at all time. What do you all think?
I think to start off, you called out a really great point about why we have so less KPIs but so many other metrics, right? Um, we can start off with that. Every metric is not a KPI, but generally every KPI is a metric. So this is something that I've learned in the initial few days. I remember joining my first job as an analyst, a senior data analyst, and that's where I was introduced to the world of metrics, dimensions, the fundamental concept of measurement, digital businesses, etc. And that's where understanding KPIs, which are some of the key performance indicators for a business, especially in the digital space, for websites, for applications, for digital channels. And that understanding was also built around the definitions, as well as uh, identifying which metrics are more important than others. So we were all taught about some of those KPIs in the digital space, such as bounce rate or sessions, or total visitors or slash users, depending on which tool you are using to capture. Um, yeah, these were all metrics, we have looked at. And for example, for a business, though these metrics might have some meanings, there might be certain other metrics that could be calculated metrics, which have, certain, you're looking at a certain subset of audiences, or you're looking at a certain calculated, set of metrics to capture the real essence of what your business value, where your business value lies. So that's, I think, is one of the key things I wanted to, remember from the beginning of my days at measuring in the world of analytics and in the world of websites.
Okay, that's super interesting, Nidal. What I think is that, once you start the measurement journey, it is kind of a dead end. Like, to reach that dead end, it's an endless loop, right? I said it otherwise, but it is actually an endless loop. Like, if I were to say that how many clicks I've gotten on a given post, just this could be my idea of starting. But then comes the concept of, as soon as you understand that in order to get clicks, you need to first get impressions. Impressions basically is how many people saw it, right? And clicks is how many people actually engaged with it. Just this little difference. And knowing that fundamentally, as you were saying, you get into a position, into a job of analyzing data. It could be at whatever level, but once you start analyzing actual data is when you will understand that, oh, impressions is a thing, right? And then you get to clicks. Guess what? Uh, I have seen that the connection between impressions and click is one of the most difficult connections to build, because different platforms out there measure impressions differently, right? So for some of them, it could just be that somebody scrolled through your feed, right? For some of them, it could be that it was a part of the feed, not even scroll through the feed, right? Or for some of them, it would be if somebody just touched or zoomed in the photograph, right? Any of those soft interactions could count in as impressions, right? And then getting this data back to actual clicks that are reported into an analytic system, the connection between these two is, in my understanding, one of the most difficult metrics to measure. Yes, they have overall level of clicks, for example, that came from Google search, right? Overall level of clicks that came from Facebook, and then overall level of clicks that were reported into one central analytics system, right? What after that? Then they also had all this impression data. The the magic is that when you tie all these back to a conversion, most channels claim the part, right? And we've kind of touched on this in one of our previous podcasts as well. But most channels would be like, hey, we need the attribution for this because we had an impression here, right? um, that's where the measurement becomes very tricky. And why businesses fall off from this, or lose interest into this, is because the end gain is very less. I could have like 1 million impression and 10 clicks, right? And those 10 clicks could lead to like $5 of revenue, right? Revenue impact, which I have kind of already paid in terms of the impressions that I've gotten, right? So then comes the super metric that you start building up on top of these things to realize your cost per million impressions, cost per million clicks, so on and so forth, right? Those are like some complicated ad matrix, which are not like directly a part of our analytics dashboards. Then comes the integration aspect, so on and so forth. So you very rightly touched into these things, but I think that um in the last 5 to 7 years that I've worked with these analytics systems, most systems have failed to um, get beyond the walled gardens, so to speak, right? Which is the advertising companies out there who do not publish their data directly into external systems, right? That's where one of the challenges is.
Absolutely, Manthan. Uh, and Nidal, my experience of working with Matrix is how much are you willing to feed the data in the right format to get the desired result, right? Business will have, obviously, if you're working, let's say, on a demand forecasting problem, what are you trying to do there? You want to predict how many units of their products is going to be sold, let's say, in the next quarter. So which matrix is going to be important? It could be RMSE, it could be MAPE, it could be mean absolute error. Depends. Um, Now, what is important as a first step, R square, adjusted R square, is that you have a very rational discussion with the business. There'll be two scenarios here. A, they have been working on a problem of demand forecasting, and they are monitoring certain set of key metrics that they want to look into. B, they want to try something new in terms of, okay, look for certain other matrix and see what sort of, if that makes sense or not, right? But before these two steps, it's also the data that you're working with. How well are you trying to tune your data in a way that you get the prediction and the robustness of the model? So these are the key things. One is discussing it, having a discussion with the business beforehand. And this second is your data, the way you're structuring your data. And the third part is the result, finally. If, let's say, if we are looking at, if the business is okay with an error of between 10 to 20%, and if you're getting 25%, or let's say 40%, what should you be doing? What will be the next best practice that you want to do to ensure that you get into the range? So what's important is key metrics are important when you have that kind of discussion within your team and within your organization with your clients. Or else what will happen is that you keep running behind getting that number, and you may not get it, and you will be in a spot. So it's not really a good place to be in, right? It's important. So as I mentioned, in forecasting, we have set of matrix that we work with. If we are working with one of the projects could be that you might work on is correcting the specifications on a website, on a, let's say, on a retail website. So what are the matrix that you're looking at here, right? One way is that there would be matrix such as MAPE involved here. But if you think from a business perspective, bounce rate, page views, conversions, all of that is going to matter when we talk about website metrics, correct? So these are two parallel things that are happening. Now, as a data person who's working on the project, it is important how you balance these out, right? With the use case that I've mentioned, just because you are able to correct specification on a website, you cannot claim that that is the reason why you might have conversion. Can you claim that we helped you to decrease the bounce rate? Yes, we can definitely, because there were incorrect specification. Now there are the correct specification which is actually required on the website. So these are the basic steps which might be very regular in terms of thinking that, okay, we may do it, but it's very crucial to have those conversations, to have your own perspective on what would be the key matrix that people have been working upon and that you think would be the right one in the use case that you're solving, and also structuring your data likewise. So this has been like an overview of my experience with matrix.
Thanks, Suman. So as you can already see, I mean, I've changed my background. So welcome to the world of Matrix, guys. Uh, Question for you, red pill or blue pill? I mean, that's the question that every CEO executive has to answer every day. Which pill to take? Because they don't know which is the right metric to follow, which metric will help them drive the right decision. They have to make millions, sometimes, believe it or not, billions of dollars of decision based on one single metric. That one single metric could be the customer acquisition cost, it could be the profitability. It's those metrics that have that have also led to a lot of uh, Carfacus, some of the confusion in the recent times regarding so many layoffs happening, investors asking for, profitability questions, growth questions, leading to a lot of market fiasco around a lot of large tech companies letting go of good talent and a lot of talent simply because they needed to maintain some of those metrics. So that's my friends, is the importance of matrix that we're talking about. Uh, these matrix can build or close businesses as a competitive advantage. A lot of investors, a lot of markets look at some of these benchmark matrix, such as profitability, their ARRs, which is annual recurring revenues, uh, their customer acquisition costs, as I said, their churn rate, what is the retention rate. We're all seeing a lot of these Shark Tank episodes as well, where some of these metrics are also being questioned. And in fact, investments are made on the basis of those metrics, despite no matter however impressive or good the pitch really was. Let me change back my background. This was just for an inside joke, so I'll keep mine back again. Uh, yeah, so that's the importance of these metrics. And in my personal opinion, metrics are a business indicator and does not have to be limited just to digital or offline or online segments. How digital and online presence can help is it can help accelerate and improve those metrics exponentially. uh, any business that grows today will have very simple metrics to look after, which is how much money they have in the bank versus how much money have they spent over, let's say, last 3 months, and how much do they intend on spending in the next 3 months. So if a smaller business, smaller needs, smaller market, fewer set of metrics. But as your business grows, it expands, it diversifies. As Manthan mentioned, the number of metrics increase. They go up to 4,000 metrics. But because your decision makers and your stakeholders are still the same, more or less, are still the same, they're still looking at those 10 key metrics that matter. So it is very important to identify what are the metrics that matter and to whom. So whenever we're deciding on metrics, it's important to also understand who's the audience who's going to consume those metrics. Which is when when we're creating so many dashboards, BI intelligence dashboards, we will realize, uh, as we also discussed in a past segment, is that while we create these dashboards for certain teams, there must be a larger picture associated to it. For example, to a marketing person, the matrix that matter could be clubbed into two broad buckets, which is growth and profitability. Growth could be associated with their website conversions, their upper funnel campaigns. How many people are reaching out, what's our brand impressions, what's our reach, what's our social media presence, engagement over social media numbers. That signifies growth for them. That how much are we reaching out to people on a month on month basis. That growth and that sentiment or market sentiment about a brand is where growth comes in. But when it comes to profitability, they have to look at the ARRs as in correlation, like their annual or monthly recurring revenue, a direct indirect correlation to the churn rate or the cohorts of the retention rate. Like how many users continue to engage with them or buy their products from one month to another month. That's your monthly churn rate or monthly retention rate that you would want to see. Likewise, we also need to ensure that our customers turn into our advocates. So, also some of those advocacy metrics could be both social media specific, like what's our brand. There's a term called brand sentiment. Brand sentiment across all our social media coverage. Plus, also how many of our users are referring. So a lot of businesses have these referral codes that they use, or the friends code. So if a person, let's say, installs a new app for the first time, they can use a referral code given by their friend in order for both the users to get some incentive. I recall Google Pay app. When we first used to install, there was a scheme that if you install this Google Pay using a referral code, both the new user and the person who referred it would get about 100 rupees or more in their account as a referral bonus. Cred used it to a very good advantage in order to grow their customer base. So this kind of incentive also helps them measure how their brand advocacy is, because only the advocates of the brand would actually put their name on the line to promote a brand forward. So while these metrics are created in such a way so that it can be measured from marketing teams, it's also important how do we roll these metrics up to our CEOs or to our executives, because the end line that they would want to see is how much money did मतलब वो वही धंधे की भाषा, how much money did I pump in versus what's the money that I'm getting out at the end of the day. That's the decision they want to see. As long as those numbers continue to be positive, business growth remains positive, business outlook remains positive. Your business will continue to storm the weathers. No matter how harsh the environment is, if it's bootstrap, it's profitable, it will continue to grow. But the moment those numbers start to dwindle towards the negative, I think even in recent times we were seeing that even large businesses are starting to come down like a house of cards. And most of that happens not because of their fall in intrinsic value, but fall in their matrix that perform and the matrix that matter. And this intrinsic value is a word that we'll dwell upon a little later, but is also driven by the matrix, essentially, which gives a sense to the investors that whether this business holds value or not, so much as they're asking for. But
I'll uh, I'll pick from what you said, Lakshit, right? And one of the very interesting thing you said was, in my understanding, is that eventually it is the revenue that we are trying to hit, right? Um, the takeaway being that all other metrics are to indicate where the revenue could be or influence revenue. So, like, I've seen this, being early on in someone else's careers, where if you give them a dashboard to build, right? Like, yeah, of course, even if no matter what dimension you're using, revenue has to be the metric in the dashboard, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to know how much a given ad or how much a given marketing channel influenced to a revenue, right? By how much or with how much, or what was the performance like, whichever that be. But think of it as this way: all of us, whatever we are trying to do, has to do with revenue, right? Everybody, even a product manager, is directly or indirectly impacting the revenue, or an analyst is also doing the same thing, or the marketing person is also doing the same thing. All other metrics, in my understanding, be it website matrix or mobile app matrix or offline matrix, whichever it be, digital, non-digital, all other metrics are only there to support one single metric called revenue. So um, it is a very interesting thing that just popped in my mind, right? I could basically take the topmost position in an organization, right? Which in this example is a CEO, and say that, hey, CEO is responsible for revenue, right? Then you go to the next person, say VP of marketing, right? They are responsible for engagement, which will influence the revenue, right? Then sales, they are responsible for finding new leads, which will augment revenue. So you get the gist, right? What we are trying to do here is that the topmost person is given the topmost metric, right? And then as you come down the ladder, your metric keeps changing, but um, at the end of the day, what you're still trying to do is impact that revenue, right? One other way to look at this is, as an analyst, when when one goes to a new organization, they start building the dashboards, right? They're like, hey, I'm the Tableau master, for example, or I'm the Power BI master, or whichever technology it be, right? You could be just doing pivot tables and that could be your dashboards. That's absolutely okay. The reason why these people, these jobs will need to evolve itself, not the people, but the job evolves itself into being, let's say, the business head, right? Is because your impact continues to increase as you go up in the ladder. So when an analyst is busy making a dashboard, they're like, you know what? One day I forgot to punch this one number here and I got an escalation, right? That could very well be their takeaway if it is someone's first month into this industry, right? Like, I just made a mistake, a little mistake. I forgot to punch in one number, or that I mispunched one number, or that my dashboard did not refresh at time, whichever technical detail it be, and then like I got screwed because of this. But guess what? All those things have a spiral impact. It's literally like a house of card, but uh, the people at the bottom have the highest impact on it, right? You take the last card from the house of cards, the entire tower will come crumble, right? And the topmost in that is revenue. That's why when a marketing channel goes off, everybody in the organization is like, it is this marketing channel because of which things did not go right. So that's the importance of matrix, and that's why, people who are out there who are just building dashboards day in and day out, you could get consumed with the fact that, oh, like, does my work even have an impact? But guess what? It is the basic foundation of all the work that you are doing, which is driving that business. If that dashboard did not exist, or if that metric did not get reported, a lot of people will suffer in terms of their jobs, right? That's why we get that. Every one of us might have gotten that heat at a point of time in life, right? Wherein some senior executive is called like, I want my dashboard updated no matter what you do, right? And like, I don't have the numbers. So it's like uh, you are in that catch 22. And then I've seen a lot of people punching numbers out of a trend. This is a very controversial thing to say, but if I knew that a given marketing channel is going to produce 20 clicks daily, and if on a given day I didn't have that number yet come in for whatever true technical reasons, I'll punch in 20, and then eventually I'll do some true up later when the boat has sailed, right? And everybody in the business will be happy because that number still told the right story. And that's the hard reality of what is happening in the background. I'm not saying that everybody is only fudging the numbers out there, right? But it's not uncommon for people to punch in numbers to get that dashboard going and then eventually doing the true up for it.
Thanks, Manthan. You know
Yeah.
what? So just combining something that both you and Suman said, parts of it. So Suman talked about some missing numbers in data analysis and data science, and you talking about some of us as analysts putting those numbers out in order to make sure our dashboards look pretty. I remember one of the first exercise that we do as a data analyst or data scientist is data pruning or data review, meaning imputation exercises as we call it, meaning trying to figure out where there are missing data set points in the data sets and trying to fill that in either with proxy numbers or completely remove them from the data set itself. uh, that imputation exercise is very important in order to get some meaningful results out of the data. uh, just to give you an example, one thing that I recall is that we were trying to make a projection for the next 3 years for a very large for a very large tech client, and revenue projections for the next 3 years. And we saw something very interesting that we hadn't taken into account is the Black Friday sales. Of course, if you remember, Black Friday sales are specifically on those 3 days of the week: Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's it. It cannot be on a Wednesday, it cannot be on a Sunday. And when we were making those projections, I realized that maybe due to because we did not specifically call out those specific dates, uh, while the projections were okay, and we sent this number to the executive, they lashed out at us because they said these are completely bogus. You don't know how to do modeling. Because what we hadn't taken into account is we were observing the spikes on the same period as previous quarters. What we did not take into account is some of those spikes appeared either on a Wednesday or on a Sunday or on a Monday, which should not have happened. It was a very simple reply that get this meter right. Now why does that matter? Why does that Wednesday matter? Why does that Sunday matter? Why does that Monday matter? Because their entire planning depends on those 3 days. The
Yeah.
businesses are eventually plan for those 3 days. There are, I mean, those 3 days of the year are what their entire 3 months take 3 months of exercise, 3 months of projections, inventory planning, market planning, demand plannings, sourcing, and everything. A lot of it depends on those 3 days, and which is why uh, the projections and predictions around those 3 days matter. So, as Manthan mentioned, that while all of these numbers have to do with revenue, I just want to also highlight that it's not always about revenue. Of course, revenue as such is an outcome of every exercise that we do. But more than just revenue, it's about planning and being prepared for certain situations that can give our own stakeholders the confidence in the decisions they make today. That is today, based on some historical outcome of those decisions. That yes, in the last 3 years that we in the decisions or in the trends that we have observed, if we take this decision today, this will continue to have a positive outcome or an outlook tomorrow as well. That's generally where we go with more time series data or available data. That's what we would call like a depth of data. If you look at a T curve, uh, T-shaped analysis, where
Yeah,
we would
just one
want
quick
to look.
comment, one
Yeah,
one quick comment, Lakshit, before you jump hoops on the time series part. What you're trying to say in terms of Black Friday is the seasonality, right? Because that's the
yeah,
term
yeah,
we want to say out there for people to be able to relate back to the example. So I'm just quoting
absolutely.
quoting that term, and then you can continue what you were saying.
Yes, 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 yes. That is absolutely correct. I mean, seasonality is of course there. That it's important to ensure that seasonal metrics are taken into account because these are not long term metrics. These are metrics specifically for those uh, key events and situations. What I was going about the width of those matrices, the matrix that matter in the moment as well. some new trends coming up, some new policies coming up. If you recall, suddenly during the demonetization stage, all of these UPI payment gateways had suddenly, like all the product managers, marketers had sleepless nights because they had to churn out content overnight in order to ensure that they capitalize on those moments. Whenever cricket fever is upcoming, all the brands change their content marketing strategy to ensure that that's some flavor of cricket or sports fever that gets included in their campaigns as well. uh, the matrix in those moments can also change, because then the objective change in that moment. Believe it or not, the business actually looks more for growth, and when they're looking more for growth, uh, they would be happy to burn some money as long as it turns into long-term revenue projections. And which is why the juggle is between growth and profitability, and there are many metrics that roll up into growth or profitability umbrellas. uh, and essentially speaking, that these all of these businesses and the businesses that we have, the HR operations that we have in a business, marketing operations, they all steer themselves towards making sure those key metrics that are defined either in the moment or satisfy the consumer in the consumers in the long term are met and reported back.
Great thoughts. I have a couple of, references to make, when it comes to the trends and observing what happens on the outside. For example, that is really crucial to the business, right? Understanding what your competitors might be doing, understanding what others in the industry might be doing, and monitoring those trends and even those metrics, right? So at some point, we have all seen organizations that are like too much focused on their intrinsic, the metrics that matter to them within their growth, within the streams of businesses that they have, whereas failing to completely acknowledge or miss out completely on the fact that there are indirect competitors out there, companies that are not at all similar to how they work, but still end up overtaking them in a way that they're either disrupting the industry, or they are selling the same sort of product or solution via or solving the same sort of business problem via a completely different product or a completely different channel. So I'd like to quote a couple of examples. Blockbuster used to be one of the largest video rental businesses, primarily, I think, in the North American market. But they failed to keep track of how digital streaming is, becoming a trend in the early 2000s. Another example is Toys R Us, which was a large business conglomerate in, dealing with toys. But when Amazon started, and it started, selling a lot of things, among which was toys as well. It wasn't something that, Toys R Us was looking at, right? What their competitor was doing. So that's just a couple of examples. I'm sure there are plenty out there. I know, all of us are thinking about one or the other brand that has simply been outdated just because they did not keep track of trends and metrics of, like, competitors, etc. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I think was interesting, something all of you said, is how you put those metrics into a dashboard depending on who is seeing them on the other side. I think is very important, and I've done some visualization workshops, and during those workshops, this is one of the key takeaways that I try to stress on, right? Who are you showing this to? And that really makes the difference. You will tend to show more of those bottom line numbers or the KPIs if you are showing to the execs. But if you are showing it to somebody who is at the middle management, or maybe someone who is on the floor, someone who is into managing the operations or the logistics, right? They would probably see some of the lower level metrics. So metrics, like Lakshit said, and I think Manthan also alluded to, can be at different layers, right? These can be at the top level, and these can be at the operational level, which tends to support the metrics on the top, but are different metrics, and needs to have focus as well, but not as much as focus as the ones that are at the top, that are the most important ones. So these are a few things I wanted to call out, and then the other very important thing to make sure when you are showing somebody a metric on a dashboard, you need to give them a reference point. What is that reference point? It can be, for example, if there is a benchmark that you have set up for yourself for that metric, then you should look at that benchmark, right? Or there is an external benchmark. Sometimes you're plugging in external data sources and you're looking at how maybe the industry is performing. Maybe you have subscribed to some of those industry reports where you're getting a feed of those numbers coming from different sources. So those could be benchmarks, or just the simple benchmark of, consistently get better at what you do, right? So you look at YOY or last year's data, or you keep comparing against what you achieved last year. So when you measure KPIs, and when you put it on a whiteboard and keep track of it, you always need to have a reference point, especially when you're showing it to somebody who might not know what, for example, someone new who stepped into a CMO role. And if you're showing those metrics, then he needs to know what has been the number so far, right? How would he just judge a number? He can compare it to, like, from where he came from, which was a completely different company, but that is not the type of comparison to make, right? So I think those things are really important. And then I will end my thoughts with just another sort of observation or a memory from, again, my initial days, is that there were certain portions of my job where all I had to do was just sit and monitor KPIs every day at the start of my day, look at a KPI dashboard. Some of you might recall which instance I'm talking about here, but essentially, come in, look at KPIs. If something is off, then you have to put your gloves on, and then just dive into the data and then figure out what went wrong. And you have to figure it out before you sign off for the day, right? And those are examples of data-driven organizations, really data-driven organizations, right? The execs, without without a day's lapse, they would look at the metrics every day. So if a KPI is not showing up correctly, it's just a matter of time before it explodes, and you get someone's email saying, why is it looking this way? So yeah, that's example of organizations that are data driven. But to an extent that if a KPI goes wrong, emails start going left and right and center, analysts get a lot of pressure. And yeah, that's where you have to, like, dig to the bottom of it and make sure you have found out the root cause, and to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So yeah, it's all for a good cause, right? It's all for keeping your eyes on those important numbers, and making sure that just that one miss cannot cost you more than what you can afford to lose. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think all of us have a lot of emotions pent up while working on the KPIs, right? I'm sure all of us have handled certain level of escalations. That's why everybody's so passionately talking about do's and don'ts, so that the community who is listening to us, it might benefit them in whatever shape and format. So as it's rightly said, right, you can't manage what you can't measure. And this is what we're speaking about here, which is KPI. Let me tell you an interesting a conversation I had with a VP of a company. He said, I want to protect intellectual capital. And it's a retail-based company. I knew that I'm speaking to VP of manufacturing. So I had a list of KPIs that I understand is important to the VP, right? Now, it was like a bouncer. I never thought that, okay, intellectual capital is going to be the most important metric to him, correct? So when I went back and tried to understand more, in certain manufacturing units, people have been working for, let's say, 30 years or 40 years of their career. So obviously they know the business in and out. And the new generation may or may not prefer to work in manufacturing units for whatever XYZ reasons, right? Now, how do you protect your intellectual capital? Because those folks who've been working for 30 to 40 years will retire in a couple of years. And how much can you actually, even though, let's say, you document it, you create videos, XYZ, you are going to lose it, right? So it was absolutely like I was in a fix, but then you tend to learn and have and do your research in a different angle. You learn to think out of the box. This was my experience of thinking out of the box and trying to understand, okay, what can be done next there. So that's why it's important to A, know what's happening in the industry, and B, sometimes it might happen that you may face a situation wherein you don't know, but that's absolutely okay. It's always a good practice to go back, do your homework, and then come back and have a rational conversation, have your own point of views, correct? On the other hand, we were working with one of the retail companies for the dashboard. Since everybody has spoken about dashboard in their experience, let me speak about it a little bit as well. The persona that we're speaking about is Chief Procurement Officer. Supply chain is the base of this world, okay? Now, for a Chief Procurement Officer, obviously they have X amount of budget being given to them because you are supposed to source materials, build your products, right? What metrics are going to be important to him? Now here, it's not exactly about revenue that we would speak about, but it's about cost optimization. If $1 billion is being given to you, how can you optimize the cost in the best way? So what matrix will be important there, right? It could be compliance rate, it could be supplier defect rate, it could be purchase order and invoice accuracy, it could be supplier lead times, vendor availability, many of them. So it's important to keep a track of them. And when we speak about manufacturing units, particularly, there will be certain companies who may have a database integrated already, but there will be many companies who don't have a unified database, right? So how will you work there? So it's important. And what was created then was basically a spend visibility dashboard, wherein we could tell them that, hey, X for XYZ materials and products, you have, this is what your KPI looks like. And with just those numbers, they could decrease their cost spendings. So I'm not saying that just with a single dashboard, you will be able to save X amount of dollars, but even getting that visibility in such a vast space of supply chain is a big thing. So that's why all these KPIs are important, right? That we're able to track it. We're able to have that conversation with folks working on the ground. Because somebody who's working, let's say, in the unit, manufacturing unit, he may or may not be as data savvy, right? But those are the people who are actually doing the ground job. So how would you input the data? And there are thousands of workers working there. So it's actually a real problem to solve. And most of the big retail clients have solved it in whatever capacity they have. But it's a very interesting space that I learned about. And also, to sum that up, that understanding the business is very important while we work on the KPIs.
Yeah. I mean, to feed off of that right point, to understanding the business is as critical as understanding the, KPIs itself is. There is actually one industry, an entire industry that runs on one KPI. You want to guess that one industry in KPI? Anybody want to take a guess? Just a gander at it. Like take
Clue,
one
clue.
industry that entirely runs on one KPI.
You want a clue? I mean,
If
all
you can,
industries run on revenue. That's one.
Yeah.
if you
I mean,
can give
besides,
the KPI, we can maybe try guessing the industry. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
easier.
yeah, it's one and the same thing. It's the media and entertainment industry, and that one KPI is TRP.
Mhm.
Okay. So I had this opportunity to work with a very large, you know, with a very large network provider, I would say, back in US, and I mean, their entire metric, because this TRP metric is so critical for the entire industry that the source of truth is actually one provider. It's either Nielsen or one more, I don't recall. Nielsen provides them with a TRP. They publish the report on a daily basis, and the same report goes out to all the network and channel providers, service providers, who then use it to decide on the bidding auction on who and how. Similarly, like Google or any bidding platform, advertising platform does, is who and which advertiser gets that next 30-minute slot. So let's say the prime time slots, the early morning slots, the late night shows. There are audiences for each of them. They have to calculate those TRPs based on household ratings, household personas. What kind of household is there? What's the typical age group in each of those households? So this is one metric that drives an entire industry. That one metric decides who gets to advertise in a prime time slot during the NFL Super Bowl, let's say. And there are advertisers who are willing to pump in any kind of money, as you would say. And that one metric drives an entire industry for that one point and drives revenue and economy for a country during certain times of the day. So that's just one example that I wanted to give. As someone mentioned about the understanding the industry and understanding the KPI. Likewise, there are very similar examples you would see across other industries as well. So when we talk about, let's say, tech/slash SaaS industry as today, software as a service, one of the key metrics that they are almost everybody is running after is ARR, annual recurring revenue. That's a question that's asked during their investors and pitches as well. Like, all good and fine. You may be burning money, you may be, not giving out all the products and services today, but what's your annual recurring revenue and what's the growth rate on it? Likewise, if you are an insurance customer, the simple metric that they would want to know is your a. I mean, it could be your customer churn rate. Like, basically, the idea is, or renewal rate. Put simply, in case of insurance, it's the simple number would be your renewal rates. How many customers who take with you the first service? How many of them renew with you next year as well? So for them, renewal metrics are very critical. In typical e-com setting, the benchmark for conversion rates is 3 to 4% across the board. So any company that can claim if they have more than 5% conversion rate is like a gold mine to any investor. So these metrics, while of course are means to measure and improve, can also be proven as a competitive advantage against your competitors in your industry. Because if you're over the benchmark, or if you're doing performing better than the benchmark, then these KPIs can help you grow faster than them, even if your absolute volumes may be lower than your competitor. You may be a smaller player than your actual competitor, but if your ratios and your KPIs are much better, much positive, uh, an investor may look at a better growth than absolute volumes. Because at the end of the day, even if you look at as a simple ratio of returns on anything, it's a game of numerator versus denominator. You can either have a very high numerator, which means you continue to have high growth, or you can have a very low denominator, in which case also you'll get much higher percentages. Which means, so even if you're a small business but with a very high positive outlook, you will give me better returns than a company that has very high, which is a very big company that may have had, let's say, 100% growth rates in the last 5 years, but is now starting to plateau because they have now reached a certain life cycle stage, a maturity stage in their business life cycle, where they're now starting to plateau. And so the next outlook would be what, 20%, 25% per year, as compared to a startup or a smaller company that may still have 50, 60% growth rate. So these KPIs, of course, like I said, not just helps businesses, not wouldn't just help businesses grow and their employees, but the intrinsic value that is associated with them because of the competitive advances that they bring in, can also help them, drive influence over the market in order to accelerate their growth.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it this way, right? If I were to take all of that and put it into a given business, um, like how it is today, I think most businesses are suffering with an influx of overly calculating the matrix, which is not bad, but then also overly using it. And when I say overly using it, I mean, two people thinking of the same metric in a different way, right? And then some people relying on automated insights that come out of that metric to say that, hey, this is what it means, right? So 10 to 20 is 100% growth, and for somebody, 10 to 20 is 10 users, right? So it gets very convoluted that way, and I think it is fully being taken an advantage of, right? Think of it as this way. I'll give you um a very simple analogy of this. When you go to the gym, you could do all the fancy things out there, right? That you can do in the gym, which is, um, you know, take that gym ball. I forget the name of it, but that huge ball on which you can exercise, or you run on a treadmill, or you run on the elliptical, right? You could do these things, or you could stick to the old school way of doing the gym, which is go get your push-ups in, right? Go get your sit-ups in, and that also will have enough impact. Now, the arguments to this can be endless on why an elliptical is better than a push up, right? Or vice versa. What I think is that it is overtly availability of options, right? That causes this congestion, right? And I just coined the term in my head and I was waiting to speak that out. It is metric congestion, right? Basically there are so many options and so many metrics out there that now as a business, because I'm a billion-dollar business, I don't know what is right anymore, right? And guess what? The person, as I was saying, like if I were to feed up from my previous example, the topmost person was busy calculating the revenue. They could care less. They could absolutely care less whether you're building your body with a push-up or with an elliptical. They care about building the body, right? So this is where things get lost in transition, in my understanding, and it is super important that the bylaws of the organization, right, when the digital transformation bylaws are being made, also talk about the matrix that would actually matter in terms of calculations, right? That should come from somebody at the top. The matrix should come from somebody at the top. The measurement strategy or the influence strategy can be with the people who are responsible for influencing it, right? But the the problem here is that most people at the top, in my understanding, do not have the time to dwell into the micro matrix there are. I could just run an A/B test on the website, right? And say that, hey, my A/B test has this much impact on revenue. Guess what? Even without that A/B test, that revenue would have come to the organization, right? It's just that now, because I have put put a microscope onto the website called this A/B test, that I am now able to show my campaign's influence on this. That's where I think this metric congestion should be avoided. One should work towards getting only into the basics first, as opposed to directly going to the fancy metrics that are out there, which will build your business, as Lakshit was saying, right? It will take you to the heights of hundreds of millions, then you'll plateau, and then the downfall begins, right? If you overly just focus on metrics, you're not building the business. Building the business and then measuring it with these metrics is the idea, and not otherwise. Is my takeaway of this. Any final words as we wrap this, guys?
Yeah, basically, as I understand, our matrix should continue to grow as a business grows. So growth of matrix with the business is as critical to the stakeholders as it is to the consumers. Like I said, for a startup, like something like customer growth could be their key metric. For somebody now in 3, 4, 5 years of the business, for them it would be more about customer retention, engagement, and profitability. For somebody much older in the business and now at a scale where they can call themselves, let's say, an industry player and not just a market player, somebody like an industry player, for them profitability and revenue matrix will become the key business metric that matter, and so on and so forth as they continue to grow. Believe it or not, customer satisfaction becomes a key metric as you go along. So for an industry, for somebody like, let's say, Reliance or Tata, revenue becomes a secondary product, and more customer satisfaction or the customer relevance, brand recall becomes the more critical metric than anything else, because that's the competitive advantage they enjoy as market leaders once they become that. in order to ensure being the market leader position is important. So
Yeah, but that's a
yeah, that
luxury,
would be
right?
my wrap up about this. That uh, businesses and matrix are just as are go hand in hand and must grow in together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to your point, Lakshit, but it's just that, not focusing on revenue is a luxury that you need to earn as a business, right?
Mm.
Customer satisfaction, of course, comes before everything else, and there are so many metrics out there which comes before it. Um, but then all of it, even customer satisfaction, is eventually to drive revenue.
Yeah.
That idea is never lost upon me.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I just have a thought. There is market research as a field, wherein a lot of surveys are conducted, a lot of KPIs are tracked. There's a lot of competitive analysis that's happening. So if anybody is interested in that field, it's a really great space to be in. The other thing is just connecting the dots to what Nidal mentioned about the companies who didn't keep up with the pace of the industry. I just genuinely feel bad that Nokia was not able to do it, because it was one of the first phones that we had in our, like, mobile phones at our home, and the most robust phone ever, right? I just get emotional because at a point in early 2000, there was only one mobile phone in our home, and whenever it used to ring, everybody used to gather together and things like that. So yeah, I just wish that it could have kept up with the industry, and hence it's important to be where, just go with the flow, right? Yeah, that's my parting thought. Thank you.
Yeah, that was one of the companies I had in mind as well, when it came to the trends and the companies that did not succeed in catching up. That said, I'm aligned with everyone here. One of the things I was skeptical about while picking this topic itself was, there's so many doors we could go through, right? There's so many doors you could open. The KPI is different for every industry. But I think what Manthan said is a great parting thought, right? Understanding the business is essential, understanding the industry is essential, and before you come to the KPIs, because like Lakshit said, there are certain industries that really thrive on a certain, like, measure one central KPI and is like completely based off of it. So there are some great examples there about, retention metrics and about revenue being one of the common metrics, and TRP. I love those examples. For example, retention, like in insurance, it is also very important in telecommunications, right? So I know some of us have worked with telecommunications industry. A lot of great examples for, KPIs that matter to different industries. But at the end of the day, yes, understanding the business and understanding that industry will only help you understand or action on a certain KPI that is getting derailed, right? How do you take action to course correct that KPI? That's not knowledge that everybody possesses, right? That's only someone who has good understanding of the industry, good understanding of what contributes to that KPI. Could be a lot of other KPIs, could be a lot of other layers, right? So yeah, that I guess is my parting thought, that in some industries, it's important to have a lot of that exposure, a lot of that experience, understanding of the fundamental way how business is, before you're able to even make any minor delta changes to a KPI within that business.
Okay, great. There is one metric that all of us and everybody listening could impact today. That is our YouTube matrix. So please go interact with us in whichever way you can, like, share, subscribe, whatever works for you. Let us know what you feel about this, and we'll continue to do this more. Thank you.